Congressman LaSurette, thanks for joining us this week.
Yep.
Before we jump into things, I want to say happy LeBron James back to Cleveland week.
Well, yeah, we talked last week about the Republican convention, and now LeBron James has made the decision, and I want to be sensitive because we have an office in Miami, and they're probably not feeling the same love that we are today, but I was actually just in Cleveland yesterday, and they have giant billboards saying "Welcome home."
I was going to say, how long did that take? Like, has the statue been built yet?
The only thing that I haven't had the chance to do, I was looking for these T-shirts that say "Forgiven," and they're not on the market yet, but I'll get those next time.
Well, I saw somebody cleverly on Twitter had put up a screenshot of a Google question, which was, how do I unburn a jersey?
Yeah.
Which I'm sure lots of people in Cleveland right now are wondering, any way to unburn that LeBron James jersey?
Oh, that's right.
All right, so on to more serious matters. Not that LeBron's not serious. The Highway Trust Fund. We've been talking about it for months, and finally we've seen some action. Talk to us about what's going on.
Well, both the House and Senate have passed an extension, and the question is, how long is the extension going to be extended? Both are premised on about $11 billion being borrowed from the general fund, and as we talked about last week, the LUST fund, the Leaking Underground Storage Tank Fund, at $1 billion. And that's enough money to continue the operation of the Highway Trust Fund through next May. And so the House's bill moves in that direction. It's paid for by some pension smoothing and increased fees on truckers and some other things. And what people would, I think, correctly describe as budget gimmicks. The Senate has adopted pretty much the same thing, the $11 billion. The only thing left to iron out is, does it last till just after the election, which is what the Democrats in the Senate want in case they lose the majority, or does it go till next May, which is what the House wants? And actually, the White House has signaled that they're fine with that too, next May. And so you're probably going to get next May and a clean extension funded at $11 billion.
So we make it through, we kick the can down the road.
Right.
What are the prospects that we have some sort of meaningful, long-term fix next year?
Well, you know, it really is dependent upon somebody stepping up to the plate and having the courage to fix the problem. And at this moment in time, you've really not seen anybody. The one bright hope here someplace, two things have happened. One in the House. Bill Schuster is the chairman from Pennsylvania of the House Transportation Committee. He's working like heck to try and find that sweet spot that you can get something actually accomplished in a long-term bill. His dad, when he was the chairman of the committee back in the 1990s, he's the architect of this, and so it's in Billy Schuster's blood. And over in the Senate, as we talked about, you have some bipartisan, Senator Corker being the key to this, Republicans stepping up to the plate and actually advocating a tax increase, an increase in the gas tax, which is one of the things that it could solve the problem, but everybody wants to shy away from it. The proof will be in the pudding, really, after the election and in this lame duck, and then moving forward into the next year. Will people sort of say, okay, you know what, we really just have to hold our nose and deal with this? But to be determined.
Let me ask you a question. Why wouldn't they seriously consider something like indexing the gas tax to inflation so that, you set up this impossible vote over and over and over again. It seems like you take one hard vote, and it might be a really hard vote, but then you don't have to take it anymore.
Well, you've answered your own question, and that's because it makes sense.
Right.
Back in 2005, when a bill called T21 was expiring, President Bush was the president, and I was on the committee, and we went to the president and the administration and said at that time, in 2005, it would have been 5 cents a gallon, and indexed to inflation was our proposal. And if that had been accomplished in 2005, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, because inflation would have adjusted the number upward, and you would have had a highway trust fund that was flush. And so. But there was no appetite to do it by the Bush administration. There's no appetite to do it by the Obama administration, and so we're stuck where we're stuck.
Well, that's our feel-good segment of the week.
That's right.
On to something else. We talked last week about the immigration crisis along the southern border right now. President Obama asked for $3.7 billion to address the issue. Not surprisingly, House Republicans are countering with their own proposal. Right. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on and how you see this playing out.
Well, the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Hal Rogers, has made it clear the president's not getting $3.7 billion. There will be some funds made available, but they're going to be made available on the terms that the House wants. and that's going to require expedited deportation of people arriving at the southern border and just thinking that they're going to stream in without following the process. Increased detention facilities, probably money for more border security people, sending the National Guard down to the border to enforce the border. So it's one of these things that again is developing. The Senate probably won't go along with what the House is coming up with, and
Surprise.
we'll have some protracted conference. But as we talked about last week, I'd make two observations. One is this is a situation that's going to have to be dealt with because it does have the public's attention, but it doesn't seem to be spiraling out of control, as we talked about last week for the president. And while it remains a big issue, it remains a political hot potato, it doesn't appear to be one of these crises that's going to really slow down the administration in a big way.
I think one of the interesting components of this has been kind of all across the country when there's been talk about housing some of these children in different localities, you've had these kind of protests erupt. And some of them have been pretty ugly. And I think some of the reaction to that has been, Americans kind of taking a step back and saying this is kind of shocking behavior. How much do you think stuff like that is going to play into this, especially as we get to August and members go home?
Well, I mean, a lot, and it's going to be particularly hot in those areas where they were talking about relocating on a temporary basis some of these kids. In Virginia, a little bit from where we're talking today, there was an initiative, I think it was Prince William County, that they wanted to put, a number of these young people and their mothers, and you're right, really strong reaction that it had not happened, and it's happening all across the country. So for those areas that were to be, it reminds me a little bit about when they were talking about closing Guantanamo Bay and moving some of the Taliban prisoners to your neighborhood.
It went over well.
No, it didn't go over very well. And I'm not equating these kids from Central America to Taliban prisoners, but it's the same sort of, we really don't want to have this problem brought to our neighborhood. This is a problem that exists on the border. It isn't for us in suburban Virginia to have to deal with it. And I think members are going to get an earful. I would not want to be, not just because of this issue, I don't think I'd want to be a member going home for August recess this year. There's a lot of anger out there in America, and I think it's going to evidence itself at some of these town hall meetings.
Well, another issue that we haven't talked about for a long time is the question of the online sales tax.
Yeah.
And that's largely because while the Senate passed something, the House has not wanted to go along with this.
Yeah.
This week, the House passed a piece of legislation that would make permanent a ban on taxing access to the internet.
Right.
It was expected to fly through the Senate. However, the Senate, with Dick Durbin and Mike Enzi, have decided to revive their online sales tax effort and hope to attach that to this effort in the Senate. Do you think we're going to get to a point where we have an online sales tax?
I think it's moving in that direction, and it's not just because of the brick and mortar vendors who complain that if you go online and buy from an Amazon.com, potentially the sales tax is not collected, and that puts them at a competitive disadvantage. If you're a store in Ohio and I go into that store and have to pay 6% or whatever the case is, but if I can go on some online site and not pay that sales tax. So that's one thing, and they're clearly a force. The retail industry is clearly a force in this. But the other player, the big player, are the states, and the states are, and the governors of those states are saying, look, if this is all the money that's going out the door, and so when we're talking to people about, having to raise taxes or having to do without at a school district or a fire department or whatever the case may be, this is money that is legally owed to us. I mean, it's not a question of do we have to pass a new law that when you buy something in a certain venue, you're supposed to pay the sales tax. So it has legs, but to this moment in time, it has not had legs in the House of Representatives. The Senate passed it a while ago now, and there's been no appetite for it in the House. And I don't think this effort is going to succeed. The effort in the House is more tied into some things that they were attempting to do at the FCC, and that is to create sort of these fast lanes, and if you pay more money, you can get better internet, and so forth and so on. And a lot of people, Republicans and Democrats, didn't think that was such a swell idea. And so that has more to do with that so the internet should be free. and that's the House bill. But the Senate said, okay, we don't agree with that, but while you're at it, let's collect the sales tax that really is due on all of these transactions. But I don't see that working in this year, but it's one of those things that's going to have to come to a head soon, and I wouldn't be surprised next year if there's a big lobbying push by the states to get that done.
Well, we'll stay tuned.
Good.
Thank you for joining us this week.
Yep.
And hey, look, I hope Cleveland has as good a week next week as they've had the last two.
The streak can't continue, but I'll tell you that it was, Cleveland was operating under this polar vortex when I was there yesterday, and so it's like 65 degrees, 70, it's beautiful, the sun's out, and so life's okay in Cleveland today.
Well, once again, thanks for joining us.
Sure.